Hello and welcome to the 49th edition of New Directors, New Films, presented by Film at Lincoln Center in the Museum of Modern Art. My name is Tyler Wilson. I'm an assistant programmer from Film at Lincoln Center, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this discussion of When a Boy Would Also Like to Have a Submarine, written and directed by Alex Piperno. This film premiered earlier in the year at the Berlinale Forum, where it picked up an award for Best Film, and although our own festival was postponed shortly after that, we're thrilled to finally present the film to our audience in New York and elsewhere throughout the States. So, Alex, thank you for your patience as we figured this new format out, and of course for joining us today.
Thank you, Tyler, a lot.
Yeah.
It's nice to be here or whatever. So
Here,
finally.
Yeah, I mean, we were just kind of briefly talking about like in this time of locking down again, especially here in New York, with restrictions coming back. Watching your film again was especially gratifying. I mean, it's of course to watch. It's like a little bittersweet to watch the film online, but I think that kind of prompted me to think about the film a bit differently too. But maybe before we get into the film itself, you can tell us maybe where you are right now and what you've been up to these past few months.
Yes, it's strange to watch or to think about the film. For sure, I will not watch the film anymore in my life, I guess, I hope. But I can imagine that if you watch the film now, it's different to watch now after all this nightmare, right? Because of the fantasy of the hypercommunication, right? Actually, I am from Uruguay, but I live in Argentina. I've been living for 15 years in Argentina, and I just came to Uruguay in September, so I could travel to France, to Biarritz, to the festival. And when I discovered that people here live almost like a normal life, not coronavirus life, I decided to move to Uruguay. So here I am in Uruguay back again after 15 years. It's strange, right? The collateral effects of the virus is also like returning home. So that's strange.
Yeah. So you're more or less leading a normal life. Are you working on another project right now, or trying to?
Yes,
relax?
I am trying to. I mean, I have this new project I am working on, but it's hard to think about this new project, to immerse in this new world, still unknown for me, because there have been so many changes in the last couple of months. So it's like very hyper stimulated. So it's hard to like make time and make silence mostly to get inside this new universe. But yeah, here we are like working on the second one, happily to start a new thing again, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I watched your film again last night, and I was thinking like one of the things that your film does really powerfully for me is conjure the sense of solitude and this feeling of mystery in places that are unfamiliar and even familiar to us. It's a film that plays out the consequences of fulfilling dreams that seem kind of impossible in reality, and we end up seeing how funny and melancholic that could end up being. But anyway, I'm curious to hear how this film started for you, if it was something that began with an image or if you brought certain ideas to these locations and characters.
Yes, well, first of all, there was the image, not the image, but the experience of when I just moved to Argentina 15 years ago. I was like going back to Uruguay in Argentina in a 3-hour ship. And at the beginning, it was strange to have the feeling of not belonging to any place, to have like two parallel lives, right? One in Uruguay and one in Argentina, and when with different people and not knowing about my other life and so on. So when I was young, that sounds like some kind of freedom or power, like not to belong. Then you understand that freedom is another thing you have to create yourself, right, by yourself. But at that time, it was like this freedom, and also the idea that the ship, if it was true that it could connect two different worlds or lives, it could connect infinite possibilities of life. So that idea of the fantastical ship, the origin was this going back to Uruguay and Argentina in the ship. Not at all a cruise ship, just a small ferry, right? But it was already a fantastical ship. So that was a first image. And then what I do is to send me a lot of emails all the time and put them all together in a Word document with images, ideas, procedures, whatever. And when I have a lot of material, I can start trying to figure out how to connect these fragments of different materials. And I love a lot, actually, that place of being an spectator, you know, because I discover as a spectator the mysterious relationships that appear with all this material put together. So there was a lot of images, broken images, let's say, broken ideas that I was watching by myself how that turned to be a film. There was different ideas. For instance, when I went to a bank in Argentina, a woman working on the bank has like beard. So that was the origin of I imagined in her life a solitude and a sadness. And that was the origin of the Uruguayan woman of the apartment. And, you know, like fragments of life that comes to be a fantastical film where when I don't know so much never what is happening. I am always trying to figure out and to discover. And I like a lot that place of I mean, not to know what's going on in the film and discovering it in every stage of the film.
So the location of the ship sort of began from your own personal experience, and you just mentioned the sort of Montevideo apartment segment emerged from this encounter you had with a woman at a bank. Could you elaborate on how the location in the Philippines came about? Did that come through a character, or was this just a place you wanted to explore in a film?
I never been in Philippines before. Actually, I mean, what was happening was that in the very beginning there was a spy plot together with the ship that afterwards it's dissolved. But it's still, I think, some spy spirit in Window Boy as a guy that keeps his secrets, right? And also there was the idea that there was a human trafficker of Chinese peasants on board in the very beginning of the idea. And then I discovered that it was kind of better not to have these Chinese peasants, but to go to watch their lives before they came to the ship. And then, because of production decisions, finally it turns to be Philippines, the place. But for me, the most important idea was that if it was true that the ship has this public place and secret place of the crew members area, right? Like it's in an invisible place on board already. Uruguay is close and distant at the same time, right, to the ship, but Philippines or whatever was the other side of the world, and it was important to go to the other side of the world. So Philippines for me means like the radicalization of the proceedings of the fantastical ship. And then we met Armin Ray Kakanindin, the Filipino producer, and that was the beginning of the love story with Philippines for us, and then was trying to understand how was the culture of the north of Philippines, and trying to bring all this documental material to the fiction, and to start to mix all that and see what happens when you mix all that documental and fictional materials together.
I would like to touch on your experience working with each of your actors, but in your answer, you got me thinking about just the way you play with the spaces in your film. The scope in terms of location is so wide, yet the film itself is in many ways very inward. You make, I think, the most out of the minimal number of locations, where we're given a lot of time to really sit in these spaces. and especially in the sequences with the ship, I was never actually quite sure if this was always the same ship we were looking at, and like in what ways you were playing with that idea even within a single location. So I'm just wondering if you can talk a bit more broadly about how you were thinking about cinematic space within this film, and sort of how you worked through those ideas with your cinematographer, because the film is really shot beautifully.
Thank you. It has to do a lot with the Manuel Revela, the DOP. Was wonderful. And when I actually start understanding how the light worked in the frame, was, fuck, I have to do all this again, because there are plenty of new possibilities of working in the frame with the lights. So that was really great also for me. Great time. But for instance, we have 5 locations for the ship. Actually, the main idea was to shoot on board a cruise ship. It was so hard try not to do that if you are gonna shoot a film, not to work in a ship. That's terrible. So it was like figuring out how to create this ship. So finally we used material from the scouting we made in 2012, and we went to different places, different ships, to try to create our ship. And I guess that you are saying that you felt like a different environment in the ship, in the magical spaces of the ship, I guess, right? This location was another ship, an old ship. I wanted to make the feeling of that when you go to this invisible hidden part of the ship, of the fantastical corridors, as we said in the shooting, the idea of going, like, it's not more the ship itself, but something else, and which you cannot say which place is. It's like the impossible corridor that leads from one place to another. So it was nice not to keep the feeling of being the same ship, but something that starts turning to be another thing, like an old abandoned place that connects places. So that idea was already in. But you know what? That place came out after we had to cancel some shooting. So because we had no money, enough money. So it disappears like kind of accidentally, this last location, and we rethink all the film after this location, which I love to do, because for me, as you were asking, I need to work with spaces. I cannot understand how's the film going, how the scenes are going, if I have no the spaces. When I confirm a location, I go to the location, I take a lot of pictures, and then when I can watch the picture I took, I can understand, okay, this has this window, this door, the off-screen can get inside the frame these ways. You know, like I enjoy to imagine the choreography inside the frame. So all my scenes can be made after understanding how this choreography will be. So for that, I need a lot the spaces, because I have no imagination by itself. I need to watch and try to understand how can I get surprised by the frame.
In terms of you understanding each space fairly intimately, does that also encapsulate the way you work with your actors? Like, do you really work through a certain choreography with each of your collaborators there? Or do you? I'm just curious generally how you work with them on the script, and if there's any encouragement to improvise in that regard.
Half of the shots in the final edit, they have masks in post-production. In the old Final Cut 7, which I love, I like to make a lot of masks, so I can work with spaces, isolated spaces on the frame of the frame. So I take one take I like with an actor, and another one with another one, and I can play and make new scenes with the different takes. And mostly, not all, but a lot, half of the shots at least, were used in a different way that they were thought in the script, because one thing is to have a script and idea, and another one is to have the materials and the needings of the editing to make things happen. So, for instance, if I was shooting here, this mirror is so interesting that for sure I'm gonna try to make something here, because here you have the door and some places, you know, an off screen that could be that could appear surprisingly in the film. So I for sure will be interested in working with this frame as an isolated part of the shoot of the frame, and you know, like start making these encounters inside the frame. So I need to understand how I can make the more the most intense way, how I make the encounters happening in the frame. So after I have the frame decided, I will try to think how it could work, and after these ideas, and then in the editing I will change everything and do another thing, for sure.
Yeah, it creates a really interesting atmosphere once you're actually watching the film. I sort of picked up on that sense a little bit, maybe even just like subconsciously when the Chico, the window boy character, finally meets the woman in the apartment in like the kitchen for the first time. There's like a very strange sort of effect happening there between them talking. There's almost like an eerie calmness that really comes out. Could you actually talk a little bit about finding and casting the actors that we're seeing in the film?
Yes, sure. I worked with non-actors. I guess that's because when you study cinema, you get to be friends of the technicians, but not to the actors. You know, it's strange. At least in my university, you are very fond of working with your friends are the technicians, but the actors are like another thing. So that strange feeling of not belonging to the same world of the actors, I guess, and also my love for Bresson made me decided to work with non-actors, and because I needed to feel the truth in their bodies, right? Like to be touched by their truth. So, for instance, Noli, the Filipino main character, was I discovered him in the scouting we made with the farmers in the village of Philippines. And when I met him, I was so clearly convinced that he was the one. And Window Boy, he appeared in a 6 seconds documentary frame of a film entitled "The Movement" of Benjamin Neistat, just in one shot. And I said, okay, it's him. He's the one. And we contact him and we start talking. And then Inés Bortagaray, the Uruguayan actress, which is a scriptwriter actually, I was Googling Uruguayan actress, and I discovered her picture. I didn't know him. I didn't know her before, but her sister. And when I saw the picture, I said, okay, she's the one. And I contacted her sister, and we met, and it was nice. So this like intuition, you know, like the very basic intuition that okay, I feel some truth in that picture or in that person. And then it's new for everybody, for me also. So we start a relationship, a different relationship with each other. You know, like for Ines, it was very clear that we were going to work with the script, but Noli and Daniel, the window boy, they didn't read the script, but I told them about the film. So I enjoy a lot that. But actually, at the end of the day, I understood that they were actors. They start thinking as an actors. And so maybe I should start working with actors also in the next film, because they finally are actors.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear actually a little bit more about your sort of working relationship with each of them, because you know your film doesn't feature an abundance of dialogue, but you're also working between two different languages. Well, I mean, I guess three if there's some English as well, and like there are two different locales. So is your way of working with your actors the same in terms of communicating, but also when you were constructing or writing the dialogue? I'm curious how these differences emerged.
Um, I think I have some ideas of dialogues or maybe dialogues, but the idea is always that they should appropriate them and say it by their own with their own words. And if they change it, I don't mind. And also, I talk a lot in while shooting. So when I discover new ideas, I will talk in the middle of the shooting and say, "Okay, and now you do this," or "You silence, shut out, shut down," or whatever, and like things start happening, and then I start also discovering or understanding how it is. So I talk a lot, and it's a mix of how they say the things, the written and not written things, and how we improvise together while things are happening. But it's not a psychological approach, of course, and accidents and the unexpected stuff are very welcome. Of course, I need to work with the accidents to incorporate the accidents and the and hazard in the film. So I feel alive, right? I feel like, oh, this is happening now. That's the most important thing for me.
Yeah. I have just a couple more questions, but I kind of want to maybe go backwards a bit and return to the concept of doorways and the way you work with them in your film. I mean, you mentioned this, maybe this came about or as far as connecting worlds when you were on this ship. But I'm just sort of curious, like when actually the idea of doorways themselves came into your film as a way of connecting these spaces, because in the film, I mean, in the film they really also function as a sort of diegetic kind of edit or an ellipsis between spaces, and they I think they really make us think about concepts of transition in time in a more head-on way than other films tend to make us think about them.
The ideas of the doors, I think that they appear. Of course, I love the off-screen getting inside the frame, so that idea has to do a lot with that. But when I was in the very beginning of the writing, I was reading Gilles Deleuze's book after Kafka, and there were some beautiful maps and images in the book with the castle, the book, the castle. No, sorry, the process. I guess the process. When the maps, with the place that were together and also distant and close to each other at the same time. That idea, that images for me were wonderful, and it has something about a very minimal way of approaching the fantastic genre, right? I don't like this Lynch stuff of black and sound and rock and whatever, and then the magic is done. But I like the very neat, clear, front of your eyes, silent magic, right? This mystery that you can see everything, but at the same time you don't understand, but not because it's confusing, but because it's very neat. I love that idea. And I always look for those those ideas of plastical decisions that with very small, with very little, something mysterious pop up, and that's cinema for me. So it's not a Bing John Malkovich film. That's clear. It's not Narnia.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, yeah.
I wonder if you can maybe, we talked briefly just about like the languages in your film, and I'm wondering if you can maybe speak a little bit about this in relation to the title itself, and maybe how it might relate to. I understand you come from a background in poetry, and because the title is especially funny once it appears at the end of the film, considering how laconic the film actually is, and I'm just wondering how you actually thought about words as you were making this film, and in what ways did your poetic point of view play out here?
But you mean like the title or the film itself?
Well, the title sort of, I mean, the title is very wordy, and there's like a sense of humor to it once you actually end up seeing the entire film, because uh, there isn't a ton of dialogue. So I'm just curious, like how you, I know your short films also have sort of long-ish titles as well, and I guess I'm just curious, just generally how you think about titles in terms of your films, but especially in relation to this film, and um, yeah.
Okay, I mean, when I used to be a young poet, and then I left that, and I married the cinema, and I stopped writing. But in that first transition, for me, it was clear that, I mean, it easily get clear for me that the cinema has different materials than literature. So I abandoned the idea of using words like the main stuff, and understood that all these cinematical materials were the words of cinema. So that's why, actually, when I discovered Timing Liang at the beginning of my studies, it was, okay, this is beautiful, this is poetry, this is cinema. And so I started to think in that way. Actually, the part of the film with more dialogues is the Filipinos, and that has to do a lot, and I appreciate a lot that that happened with the way of the actors to approach the film, because they talk a lot, and that was so nice. The music of the words and how they talk all together was so wonderful for me that it was like, okay, let's keep this, and but more as a texture, right? At a texture. Um, and so that's one thing. Anyway, in this new project I am working on, I am trying to incorporate a lot of dialogues, because as I don't know how to work with them, I want to approach that. But and regarding the title, I mean, I don't think cinema in terms of dialogues, but in terms of movements and choreography and all that. That's why, I guess. But I want to start thinking in different way. But and regarding the title, it was part of a very bad line of an old poem I wrote, and it kept changing, and it was like started it was different. But then I put Ventana Man is and then Chico Ventana, Window Boy, and then it appeared the Submarine, and I didn't know so well how it was connected with the film, but I understood that there was something to do with the desire of still to circulate in, even if the catastrophe occurs. I mean, Window Boy would also like to have a submarine, because he would also like to go through underwater, opening new doors, and so that spirit was on the title, and also the idea of the bad translation, because in Spanish you would never say Chico Ventana. It sounds like a bad translation from English, and this bad translation and dislocated logic of the bad translation is nice. Is cinematic. It's poetry, I guess. I mean, poetry for me is when the materials don't have a connection, but in any case they are connected. So something about the broken logic is nice for me, and also I guess that in the film you feel that broken logic,
Yeah.
but still it's a logic, and you can still follow it, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
Just in the known, not so only for Window, but also for the spectator with the film, like with its own logic.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for that. Alex, that's all I have for you. So I just want to thank you for sharing the film with us, and taking the time to talk about it a bit more. Good luck with your next project, and I hope you stay safe in Uruguay.
Thank you a lot, Tyler. It was, I mean, I am so happy to finally be here. This is happening, and that's a very good news. So thank you a lot.
Thanks again. Anyway, take care. Thanks to our viewers for tuning in.
See you. Enjoy the film.